It's time for Recipe of the Day. With St. Patrick's Day around the corner, I'm in the mood for some wonderful comfort food from across the pond. Today I'm telling you about shepherd's pie. Well, sort of. This is what we call shepherd's pie in the United States, but actually over in the UK, Ireland, over there, what they call shepherd's pie is actually made with ground lamb. We use ground beef, which they would call cottage pie. So I'm doing a classic shepherd's pie with the word classic, meaning classically American. And this is actually, I'll be honest with you, not something that I like to make very often because it's one of those things that involves like more than one step before you can actually get it into the oven. And I just find it like annoying for weeknights, but I will do it for a special occasion like St. Patrick's Day. So you're going to start by preheating the oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't need it just yet, but you are going to need it later. And then you're making the mashed potatoes. So you have 2.5 pounds of regular russet potatoes, Idaho, anything like that. And you're going to peel them and cut them into 1/2 to 3/4 inch pieces. And those are going into a big pot with cold water and a tablespoon of salt. Turn the heat up to high, cover it slightly, bring it up to a boil, and then uncover it, give it a stir, drop the heat down to just a simmer, and you're cooking until they are fork tender. It's going to be, 10-ish minutes. Now, while you're waiting for the potatoes to cook, you could prepare your meat filling. So you're going to heat some oil, about a tablespoon, in a skillet over medium-high heat. And then you're adding in a small onion that you finely chopped and 2 carrots peeled and finely chopped. If you have baby carrots in your fridge, if that's what you're using, just get a couple handfuls of them and run your knife through them. Cook, stirring those occasionally until they're softened, and then stir in 2 cloves of garlic that are minced up. And you can use 2 sprigs of fresh thyme or a teaspoon of dried thyme leaves. If you have that more powdery dried thyme, it's a little more intense in flavor. You probably want to drop that down to a 1/2 teaspoon. Then you're adding in 1.5 pounds of ground beef. I like to use something with like a medium fat here, ground chuck, maybe just a little bit more flavor. And you're adding that meat in along with 1 teaspoon of salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. Stir that occasionally until the meat is cooked through. It's going to take about 7 to 8 minutes. Drain off any excess fat. Then to that meat, you're adding 2 tablespoons of flour and a tablespoon of tomato paste. Stir that in. Then add a cup of beef broth or stock. I like to use a low sodium one just because I've been adding salt and this lets me control it a little bit more. And 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. Now that's going to be a little bit liquidy. You're going to bring it up to a boil and then reduce the heat down to a simmer, stirring it occasionally until it's really thick. Basically, the liquid's evaporating away and some of that flour is helping to thicken as well. If you use the fresh thyme sprigs, you could take those out at this point. Then you're going to add some corn and peas. I'm using frozen corn and frozen peas, 3/4 cup of each that you needed to thaw first. So actually you could even do it now. Pop them in the microwave for a couple of minutes or run some hot tap water on them just until they are no longer frozen. And then you stir that into your meat mixture. Give that meat mixture a taste and add more salt and pepper if needed. And then you can turn the heat off under that. Set it aside while you finish off those potatoes. Once they are fork tender, you'll drain them and then put them back into the pot they were cooking on and put that back on the stove. And you just give it a little stir. It helps to dry out the potatoes, which will make them a little bit fluffier. And then take that off the heat. And you're going to stir in 2 tablespoons of butter, mash that in, and then heat up some milk, 1/4 cup of milk, and add that to the potatoes as well. And then there's an egg yolk added in here. I've seen that in a bunch of recipes, and I did do it when I was creating this recipe. I don't know that it makes much sense. It doesn't really set anything up anymore, but I think that is the idea behind it. So you would add that, but you need to like stir really fast as you're adding that egg yolk in so that it doesn't start just cooking and becoming like cooked egg yolk in your potatoes, right? Okay, taste those potatoes and season those with more salt if you'd like. And then you're getting out an 11 by 7 inch baking dish and you put the meat mixture into there and then top with the mashed potatoes. And you want to go right to the corners corners and right to the edges. That helps seal the meat in to avoid some boil overs if your meat is a little bit full. But you also can make sure that you put your baking dish onto a baking sheet that's bigger than it is, and then you won't get any mess in your oven if it does boil over. And then I just like to take a fork and kind of make some little swirly motions in the potatoes, and you drag your fork through, and those little peaks that end up forming are the ones that are going to brown more quickly in the oven. So then you're transferring that into your 425 degree Fahrenheit oven and baking it just until the potatoes are lightly browned on top, about 25 minutes. So that might be a little bit more work than I normally want to do on a weeknight, but I will say I have done this before and made 2 of them and frozen one. It actually works very well. You just take it out of the freezer the day before, put it in the fridge, and then you can bake that up. It's going to take longer than the 25 minutes because you have to heat it through all the way. This version I was just telling you about, the meat was hot and the potatoes were hot. We just wanted them to brown. So that's the only difference. They're going to be in a lower oven, 350 degree Fahrenheit oven for about 30 minutes, and then you can crank up the heat to brown those potatoes at the end. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is March 13th of 2025. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast recipe of the day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.